certain other people be. Nobody is completely objective. We're all subjective. The scientific method was meant to be a safeguard on that. It's like the safeguard against falling in love with the wrong person, you know. You might make certain rules for yourself or red flags for yourself to try to choose an appropriate mate or to be the appropriate mate. But safeguards can still fall through, but the scientific method itself, Francis Bacon designed that to be that safeguard, but we still have biases. It was Milford Walpoth at University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, I'm forgetting which campus. He said that objectivity does not really exist in science. He said even the selection on which data that you observe to record and which data you do not record is a reflection of the bias of the experimenter. That's why we have to record everything to try to keep ourselves honest. So bias is there and it's real. It is unscientific, but it's a part of being a human, and I think that's part of the mystery. I think as long as teaching is a human enterprise, computers can never take it over, not even R2-D2. You know? And I think as long as science is a human enterprise, it will have these human elements in it. The problem that bothers me is it seems that the scientific method is being put to the side, and it's becoming a warfare, a popularity contest, and the only time the scientific method seems to matter very much to people is in biotechnology for money, you know, or just tech, new developments in technology with money. Then they care about what works or not. I have two friends who are PhDs in organic chemistry who work for Eastman Company, and I asked Dr. White and Dr. Falling, do you get in trouble at Eastman for being members of the Appalachian Creation Science Association? And Alan said to me, well, I've got 40 patents. As long as I keep making patents for Eastman, they don't care about believe in man and moon. They don't care. It's money in a corporation like that matters. But if you're a college professor like me, ooh, yes, it matters. And I'll tell you right now, being a creationist, every time I've taught earth science and fossils or biology, I have always taught creation and evolution together and presented both viewpoints to my classes. And I've only gotten in trouble teaching at Christian college. Never at a secular school. 15 different colleges and universities, and many high schools and junior highs, public and private. And it's only been compromising Bible-professing Christians who have had a problem with me. I'm having a problem with the school I'm teaching at now, and Carson Newman College in Jefferson City, Tennessee, a Southern Baptist college, denied me tenure because I didn't believe in Darwin. I was the only professor with science credentials who didn't believe in Darwin. They were intolerant of diversity of thinking. Unfortunately, at a Baptist college, my diversity was Bible. I believed that Genesis was literally true. Now, there were many other professors that did, but none that had that did anything had to do with science like me. So that's philosophical, and it's about the human condition. I think all philosophies, in their honestnesses, are an attempt, and religions too, to try to overcome our nastier instincts that we're ashamed of. Being a playa, being a liar, being a bad friend, being a cheater or a thief. You know, where do morals come from? We were talking about, I think science can't really totally touch that. I don't know. You could do experiments on someone, put a paper bag over their head, the person's head, and see if they'll electrocute them more. That's a famous experiment. Okay, well, anyway, this gets on. Now, not being objective. What I want to do is just look at fossils. They asked me to speak on human evolution. The only actual hard evidence we have is the fossils. Now, an after-the-fact scene of the crime scene evidence would be the DNA evidence. But that's all going the creation way too. But let's take a look at the fossils here. Let's take a look at fossils. I'll do a very short presentation because if I went over all the fossils, we'd be here all night. So I want to go over the newest fossil, Homo naledi. And the the guy who came up with that fossil. In 1859, though, Charles Darwin, in his book, The Origin of the Species, talked about missing links, but he called them intermediate varieties. The number of intermediate varieties which must have formerly existed on the Earth must be truly enormous. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum, every rock layer full of such intermediate links, missing link fossils? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graded organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. Darwin knew in 1859 that the missing links were going to be a big problem for him, and he had every faith that the links between the different phyla and orders and classes of living things would eventually be found, including going from the great apes to humans. They would eventually find these missing link fossils. Now, we do have orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans today. And we have extinct forms of these same things, including extinct forms of humans. We've got that documented in the fossil record. We have ancient humans who are now extinct, like the Neanderthals, who have been reclassified as Homo sapiens. We'll get to that. What we don't have in the fossil record is, and it's systematic. It's obvious by its absence. We have lots and lots of extinct chimpanzee, gorilla, orang, and human fossils, but according to evolution, we did not come from the monkeys. They are not our grandparents. They are our cousins, our modern-day cousins, from a common grandfather, common great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and great-great-great-grandfather, and so they are our cousins. There was this monkey-looking thing, and some of them turned into us, and some of them turned into chimpanzees. But on the way, they got very chimp-like looking, and we got a lot of fossils of those. They got very human-like looking, and we got lots of fossils of those. And I'm not kidding you, I'm going to show you this. It's right here where evolution does its magic part of the story, that there's nothing to document that that part of the chart ever happened. We have all these other fossils, but we don't have. It's in all. It's the dinosaurs and all the major steps. Fish turning into land-walking creatures, dinosaurs turning into birds. The whole thing is messed up at just these junctures where it's needed. So that's what I'm going to look at, and I'll look at the newest one. Just to give you a little documentation, Modern Quotes, 2010, the last common ancestor of chimpanzees and humans, the grandfather, remains a holy grail in science. 2010, haven't found the most recent common ancestor, MRCA. We thought we had just about nailed human evolution. Now everything's up for grabs again. New Scientist, 2011. Bernard Woods, very famous evolutionist out at Harvard. The origin of our genus, Homo sapiens, is genus and species. Genus, Homo, species, sapiens. The origin of the Homo genus remains frustratingly unclear, 2011, from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Scientific American, in an article called First of Our Kind, 2012. But with so little evidence to go on, the origin of our genus has remained as mysterious as ever. Okay, the people who actually go out digging up the fossils, actually go out trying to formulate a model and a story and a history documented by scientific evidence, they're the ones that will be the first to admit, you know what, we haven't got this nailed down. And I respect and admire that. You know what, we have a problem here, and we're working on it. Every one of these people completely believes in the evolution theory, and they're certainly welcome to do that. They're saying, we need to find these missing links. It is a problem. They're admitting they have a problem. They're not, weakening in their stand that evolution is true. And I got to respect sticking to their guns like that. But they're also saying, look, guys, fellow evolutionists, we got a problem here. In the year 2011, the Australopithecus sediba fossil was discovered by Lee Berger in Africa. And I want you to notice the features on this mock-up. Notice the ears, which you can't tell from the skull, the hairline, which you can't tell from the skull, the skin texture and tone, the lips, even parts of the nose, certainly the body hair. You can't tell any of that from, now you can tell the brow ridges. Depending on how much of the skull you find, you can tell the shape of the skull itself and the teeth. You can tell some of the musculature from the little pits in the bones where the muscles attach by tendons. Now, here's another thing. Every time they make one of these little mock-ups, they always draw the sclera, or the whites of the eyes. Monkeys' eyelids are different from ours. You cannot see the whites of their eyes. Even animals like a cow or a horse. You know, if you're messing with the horse back there, maybe if they turn their head and roll their eye really far, you'll see the whites of their eyes. That's when you know they're really worried about something. But human eyes look like this. You cannot tell the eyelids. They always make these eyes look human and not monkey. They do everything they can to make it look as human as possible. This is what they found, okay? Now, also notice that Lee Berger's head is a huge bit bigger than this. You didn't realize that was that little, did you? That's the size of the head. There's the eye sockets. This is what they actually found. And this is what they drew. Now, if I believed in evolution, I'd use evolution-guided imaginations to make up the rest of the data too. But the reason I'm focusing in on Lee Berger, a lot of evolutionists, and I will show this to you, many leaders in the evolutionist community think this guy is a little out there because he kind of goes too fast and goes beyond the data like this picture does. But National Geographic loves him, and so he got this article in National Geographic for Australopithecus sediba, which was supposed to be the missing link between the Australopithecines, Australopithecus africanus, and Homo habilis, or handyman. So, does this mean Australopithecus sediba was the missing link? Well, scientists don't like that term, which Lee Berger calls biologically unsound. Okay, just because he's saying missing link is biologically unsound doesn't mean they're not missing. They just don't like that terminology. And here are the, look at this, game changer evolution African bones. Closest human ancestor may rewrite the steps of evolution. Berger's interested in notoriety for recrafting the evolutionary story of how humans came from monkey-like creatures. The researchers do caution that although they suggest Australopithecus sediba was ancestral to the human lineage, all these apparent resemblances between it and us could just be coincidences. And at least I'm glad that they were admitting that in yahoo.com. I'm trying to show you things that go on in the evolutionist community. The reason I'm mentioning a 2011 find is it was Lee Berger who brought forth to the world the Homo naledi fossil last year. Australopithecus sediba, Texas A&M says it's a possible ancestor for the Homo genus, us. But Ian Tattersall, who is like the evolutionist's greatest world expert on Neanderthal fossils, the guy, it's his whole life's work, at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, he said, sediba's a distinct species, probably closely related to Australopithecus africanus, the one in the story after Lucy. But I wouldn't classify it as the root of the Homo genus. So there's debate about it when a new fossil comes up and they make these mock-ups and everything and they all discuss it. But Berger is the guy who came up with the newest one, Homo naledi, and that's why I'm mentioning him. In 1998, Berger got in National Geographic. This was before Australopithecus sediba, and it was the Australopithecus africanus fossil, and National Geographic realized they had to redraw the family tree because something was wrong with Australopithecus africanus. There's Australopithecus afarensis, which is Lucy. How many have heard of the Lucy fossil? Lucy, okay. And after that, 1 million years later in the story, because it's higher up enough in the fossil strata in the rock layers that evolutionists, by their reckoning, would say it came 1 million years later. That's the next one up is Australopithecus africanus. Now look at these words carefully and what they're saying. Because the fossil record for early hominids, 1998, is so fragmentary, inferences and predictions fill in the gaps. In the absence of fossil specimens complete enough to gauge Australopithecus africanus's body dimensions, it had been assumed that the species had at least as human-like a build as the earlier Afarensis, Lucy's species. Well-preserved skulls show that Africanus had a slightly larger brain than Afarensis, as well as skull features that resembled those of the first Homo species. Now, everyone in the room here has different shaped skulls. Just look around. So that's well within the range of normal differences, and it's not necessarily an evolutionary sequence. But take a look at what they say next. A closer look at the available fossils in 1998 reveals Africanus may have had longer arms and shorter legs than Lucy. Limbs that were more chimp-like than Afarensis. Okay, this is backwards from their story. If so, the implications are striking. Not if you're a creationist. Only for an evolutionist is this striking. One possibility is that hominids underwent an evolutionary reversal between Afarensis and Africanus. Okay, here's what happens. They find a monkey-like looking thing that is touted since 1974 as the missing link. And a million years later in the rocks, by their reckoning, they find another fossil that instead of becoming more human-like, it looks more like a monkey than Lucy. They found exactly the opposite of what their theory said they should find, and it did not bother them. I feel like silly rabbit, tricks are for kids, you know. Silly creationists, science is for evolution. Silly creationists, evolution just went backwards for a million years. That's the simple explanation. If we did something like that. See, that's a little ingenuous, and it is a problem, and it should be, but it just reversed evolution, perhaps to adapt to a more arboreal environment. Berger, here Lee Berger weighs in 1998, thinks it more likely that the two species evolved separately. For one of them to evolve is bad enough, but now he says they're separate lineages. So the most probable idea is that Afarensis and Africanus are sister species that share a missing link ancestor. Okay, now that makes neither of them the missing link. That means they are sisters and some other link is now in there that they came from. So it's just saying that they might have even lived at the same time. They're sisters. One's not the grandma or the grandpa. If so, only one could have been ancestral to humans, which branch of the family tree eventually led to us. So this is the kind of things that Berger has weighed in the past few years, and I've been following what he's been doing. And then in 2015, Sadiba in 2011, Naledi in 2015. Now, I think the other evolutionists in the evolutionist scientist community have had it with Berger, but this thing got on the front cover, on the front cover, but in National Geographic as the next step, Homo naledi. It's a big ancestor of us, and human-like species discovered in South Africa. Well, there's Lee Berger there. Researchers admit that a lack of an accurate age, there was no rocks or fossils or anything they could test using even their age-determining techniques. They couldn't figure out a way to test the age of the bones. They admit a lack of an accurate age complicates news of the discovery. According to Lee Berger, if our present understanding of the time frame of the genus Homo, us, is right, then Homo naledi must be somewhere older than 2 million years ago as a species. But he also says it's possible, however, that the fossils could be less than 100,000 years old. That's a big gap. That's many, many, many times younger. And the lady here, Carol Ward from University of Missouri, weighed in Science News magazine right after the fossil find. Without dates, its evolutionary significance is unknown. So, and this is also a little fade shadow of a human skull, and then Homo naledi's skull there also. You can see that none of the facial bones, most of the facial bones, you got the maxilla up here, and you have a little bit of the face, but most of the face is missing, but they managed to draw it, and the whites of the eyes very, very prominently there. Now, here's another thing you need to know about the Lucy fossil, all the Australopithecines, and the difference between them and modern humans. The human foot, you have bones in your feet and your hands. Now, I can curl my fingers to get a grip on something, but the bone between my knuckles is straight as an arrow. But look on the monkey's foot, a chimpanzee's foot, and you can see the chimpanzee has an opposable thumb. It really has a hand at the end of its leg. But notice that the bones are curved in between the knuckles. This enables a monkey to get a perfectly round grip on a perfectly round branch. And that's great if you live among tree limbs. It's perfect. And their foot is like that, and their hand is like that, but not human feet or human hand bones. And look at what they said about Homo naledi. It had dramatically curved fingers that indicate it was adept at climbing trees, a wide flattened pelvis and shoulders similar to Australopithecus, which is Lucy and that Africanus fossil. And then they said Homo naledi likely walked much like us. Okay, here's a problem, because in 2005 they said Australopithecus afarensis almost certainly did not walk like us. No arched foot. The navicular bones were probably from a Homo habilis. It's like an ape. It's flat-footed. These were guys, two guys from the American Museum of Natural History and from Western Michigan University at the American Association of Physical Anthropologists saying this in Scientific American. It's not the Creationist Sunday School Journal. So it had already been determined that Lucy, the afarensis, did not walk like us because of those toe bones. Now they're saying it walked like us. Similar curved fingers, which would mean curved toes, I assume, similar to Australopithecus. It was no taller than 5 feet, less than 100 pounds, had a brain the size of an orange, 1/3 the size of a human. It's exactly like a chimpanzee. Berger and his team originally submitted multiple papers on Homo naledi to the prestigious journal Nature, the most premier science journal in the world, the oldest and most esteemed, which rejected them. Berger and his co-authors ultimately published their findings in eLife, an open access peer-reviewed online journal, which the other evolutionists didn't necessarily like. This is the newest offering to the missing link story on human evolution from monkeys to humans, and that's why I'm picking on this. But I'll show you all the other ones, and we can go into detail on any of them that you like. Fred Spoor, who was very famous for research in Homo habilis, handyman, and Homo erectus, upright walking man. He's from University College in London. He said he doubts that Homo naledi was a direct ancestor of modern humans. The possibility that Homo naledi deliberately disposed of bodies in the cave is interesting and intriguing, but will also be controversial, because they found all the fossils in a cave. It was a very small cave. The thought was that their friends dragged them in there and buried them. But they did find fossils of all different ages. So they would have to be plagues or being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger or something like that. So what Lee Berger said was, this is burial, and that's definitely human. Animals don't bury their dead. None of them do. They'll bury their poops before they'll bury their dead. And we find Neanderthal graves with flowers in them. Neanderthals had ideas of the afterlife. They had religion. They had art. We find their cave art. They liked colorful clothing. We found flax fibers that were turquoise and pink in their cave. We found the evidence they went on hunting parties. They used makeup, even a bare bone with holes drilled in it like a flute. Some people are trying to say that was, wolf tooth marks. But evidence, very good evidence that everyone agrees now, Neanderthals have the hypoglossal canal in the skull, where the hypoglossal nerve goes from the brain to the mouth parts. Neanderthals have the same size hypoglossal canal as us, and monkeys have a little teeny weeny thread-like nerve that goes there. Monkeys have the hardware. They don't have the software support to talk. They have thoughts, but they can't vocalize like we can. But Neanderthals could. We have anatomical evidence they could. Their brains were larger than ours. Homo neanderthalensis has now been reclassified in all of the newer classification books and magazines and research paper articles and museums as Homo sapiens. We're Homo sapiens variety sapiens. They're Homo sapiens variety neanderthalensis. So we're both Homo sapiens now. Homo heidelbergensis, Heidelberg man, is now classified as Homo sapiens. How many ever heard of Cro-Magnon? Yep, that's Homo sapiens now, and now Neanderthals are Homo sapiens. You see, we used to have all these little monkey people. These little monkeys turning into monkey-like people, and then into people like monkeys, and then than people. But now, according to the creation model, that God created everything separate, you never did have monkey people. God made monkeys, God made people, and there were never any monkey people. And now all of these things are being re-looked at as either monkeys or people, and the missing links that they were, touting are dropping out. And all of those things, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, Cro-Magnon, and what's the other one I mentioned? I forget. Are just people. They were just people. Okay, we'll get back to that. Susan Anton, who is definitely not a creation sympathizer, she said some very harsh things about us. She said, the fossils are fabulous and a bit confusing. Doubts about whether the new finds come from an early Homo species at all. All I'm saying is I'm showing that there is a self-checking system going on here, and that the newest missing link is now being argued. Tim White is the guy that brought to the world the Ardipithecus ramidus. Tim White also was the person who said to the world, Ardipithecus ramidus is not the missing link. But a few months later, it showed up on the front of National Geographic as the missing link. They didn't even listen to Dr. White. Dr. White is the head of the human evolution division there at UCal Berkeley. Look what he says. Look in this article, Bones of Contention, Why California Paleo Expert So Skeptical of Homo naledi. White observed claims that the hominids might have buried their dead were hyped heavily in publicity materials. There is no evidence of burial rituals, the Berkeley professor said. The only evidence seems to be we can't think of anything else. This is not evidence. So he's being a little bit harsh on this. Here's Dr. White with some of his students at UCal Berkeley, and he says, it says, Berger's findings are probably South African representatives of Homo erectus, or upright walking man, who also White is pretty much an expert in the evolutionist community on that. The Homo naledi cranium is similar in conformation and size to Homo erectus. White said in a recent interview at his Berkeley lab, I wrote a text on human osteology. Also, I teach a class on variation in humans, bone variations in humans. Many of the characteristics that claim, that Berger and his friends claim differentiate Homo naledi from Homo erectus are differentiations that vary within our own species. So you look at that and you realize these claims of a new species are a little sketchy. This newest one is probably not. Claims of a new species are a little sketchy, says Tim White, and Lee Berger says Homo naledi is already practically the best known fossil member of our lineage. Again, I think he's just interested in making a name for himself. Tim White, who is a total evolutionist. Tim White, I really appreciated what he did back in the early 90s. Someone discovered a bone and thought it was a collarbone or a clavicle of a new missing link monkey human. And they went all over the place getting all excited about this, and later they found out that it was really a dolphin rib, and they found more of the fossil. Now, I'm not trying to make fun because they actually went, our bad. Dr. White was the one who lovingly named it Flipperithecus. And he has the ability to laugh at himself. So I kind of like Dr. White because of that sort of thing. I've been following these guys, whatever. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. I actually have gotten to talk with some of these people that are in the evolutionist community, and some of them I find very easy to talk to. Some of them I don't, but actually that's more not the case. I didn't have a very nice conversation with the president of National Center for Science Education Incorporated, the world's largest privately owned We Hate Creationist group. It was Dr. Kevin Padian. I was speaking at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and the night before that he was speaking. So I was in the audience and listened to him speak and came up and talked to him some. I was flattered he actually knew who I was. I was like, maybe he had Googled me or something. He picked me out in the crowd. It's the biggest compliment. evolutionists ever gave me. But he did not stay to listen to my talk the next night. But anyway, he was not very nice to me. But most of them are fun to talk to. It proves that people who are enemies in a academic arena can get along well personally. Okay, in 2011, when Berger showed the world the Australopithecus sediba, he submitted this chart to National Geographic, and he did not make any connection on this family tree between the limbs. He just put the limbs there, not saying they actually came from each other. This was his new, at the time in 2011, sediba, which he said was a different route by which humans evolved, and bypassing Homo habilis altogether. Also, Tumai, the Australopithecus, Sahelanthropus chadensis is not even on the chart in 2011. It used to be, but it didn't go well with the genetic data they were looking for, so they dumped that fossil as the missing link, although the public probably only remembers in 2002 the cover of National Geographic saying they found yet another missing link, but now they've dumped that one. That bothers me too, that sort of thing happens. So at the bottom of the chart on the left, you can see it was Lee Berger who made this chart here, giving his new find great prominence. And there are no branches on this, no connection between the branches on the tree except imagination. Okay, I'm going to sum up with this chart. And this was 2009 when Ardipithecus ramidus was brought forth by Tim White, and there is Ardipithecus ramidus there, RD for short, like Australopithecus afarensis is Lucy for short. Sahelanthropus chadensis is Tumai for short. Well, okay, let's just go through this chart from Science Magazine 2009, which is one of the more recent and complete charts. I'm not using Berger's chart. Most evolutionists probably wouldn't either, although National Geographic likes him. That was Milford Walpuff at University of Michigan says Sahelanthropus chadensis was actually some kind of an ape and not a hominid at all. It is in a line of non-hybrids that were not human ancestors, reports the Associated Press in the Washington Post in 2006, 4 years after the fossil was discovered. Newsweek said, it's not the first creature ancestral to humans after all. So it isn't on Lee Berger's list, and it is on this one 2 years earlier, but I do find that this is eliminated from most of the list. The DNA findings where they believe that the DNA analysis shows that humans broke off from the monkeys 6 million years ago, and as you can see, Sahelanthropus is in a layer that they have dated at 7 million years ago. It's 1 million years off in the story, so they don't want to use it. So it's just relegated by me and them as monkey bones, and it's in the wrong order for evolution. So we can get rid of Sahelanthropus chadensis. Now, UCal Berkeley said that Sahelanthropus and Auroran should be in the same genus. Well, if they're the same thing, and genus is very close, then if Sahelanthropus isn't our ancestor, then neither would Auroran be. And they also said Ardipithecus would be in that same too. So I'm going to go ahead and exclude Auroran tugenensis. There's not very much known about Auroran tugenensis. But all of these I can give you great detail on if you want to focus. It's just this would take 2 or 3 hours to go through every single one. If there's any one of these that you've heard of or that you think is the best case that you've ever heard of, we'll go into the detail and I'll show you everything that I've actually got on that thing. Ardipithecus ramidus, Tim White said it's not the common ancestor. And yet, here it is on this chart as an ancestor. Lucy is relegated to a side branch on the family tree, says the New York Times in 2008. And a lot of this is because Africanus and Afarensis have a revolutionary reversal. Afarensis almost certainly did not walk like us, says Scientific American in 2005, but walking upright was one of the big dramas about, ooh, Australopithecus Lucy walked upright like us. Lucy's been dropped by some researchers in evolution community even as nothing but a dead monkey. Of course, I would believe that these were dead monkeys and people that drowned during Noah's flood for the most part, or maybe drowned in their little cave during a flash flood or something. Maybe that's what the Naledi fossils are. The Africanus is more chimp-like than Afarensis, an evolutionary reversal, not very likely. Tim White makes fun of theories that say evolution could go backwards. It goes against Dollo's law of evolution under the evolution theory. So Australopithecus africanus is backwards to the evolution story, so I think I can get rid of all the Australopithecines. This is where Australopithecus sediba would have fit in if the rest of the evolutionist community ever does accept it. Homo habilis, handyman, Homo erectus, upright walking man, and then these ones that I mentioned before, we'll get to them. Homo habilis never gave rise to Homo erectus, said Fred Spohr of University College in London, when they found that these two were actually the same age. So it couldn't be another million years apart. It was like finding out that your grandmother and your great-grandmother were sisters, rather than actually one being the ancestor of the other. Homo habilis and Homo erectus were non-sequence contemporaries. And so that people did not come from Homo habilis, says the evolutionist community. Homo erectus almost certainly was a dead end and not, as some scientists had argued, our ancestor. Newsweek reported on DNA statistical findings that the evolutionist community was saying it's not really our ancestor, but another dead end. So you can take that flagstone out of the walkway leading up to us. Homo erectus DNA disqualifies it from being the common ancestor. The rest of them are humans. They're not monkeys at all. Heidelberg man, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man, and then there of course is us, Homo sapiens. And the Homo floresiensis, the hobbit fossil they found on the Isle of Flores in the Indonesian islands. No one quite knows what to make of those, except that maybe they were a tribe of pygmies. But probably none of them are saying it's a missing link. I don't even know why they put it in there. They don't put any connection to it, but that's very controversial anyway. Okie dokie. Well, maybe I should leave that up. Again, we can talk about any of these, and we could talk about DNA or junk DNA or body parts or homology or any other missing links, like birds to dinosaurs to birds, or fish to amphibians, or amphibians to reptiles, or reptiles to mammals, or reptiles to birds, or monkeys to people, or anything you want about any of this, I can go into detail. And actually, Brother Sean had, yes.
Well done.
Ooh, it's just like Phil Donahue. There we go.
Okay.
Ooh, now we're going to be live on tape. There we go.
Are you ready? Dr. Jackson, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. I had just one question. Could you explain a little bit about the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon, and why are they, I guess, differentiated in size and those kinds of things? Is that some sort of evolution within our own species? Could you just, I guess, expand on that a little bit?
The word evolution just means change. And if we're actually just talking about change, yeah, I mean, you look different from your grandfather, but a lot like your grandfather. Both of you are humans. Actually, Darwin's book is called The Origin of the Species, which means originating new species. We're going there. Here we go. So actually changing from one thing into another, no, but that same thing changes. Okay, like, you know, if you mate a donkey and a horse, you get a mule. We've now found out that horses can mate with zebras and get a zorse. Camels can mate with llamas and get a comma. And everybody knows about the liger because of Napoleon Dynamite. Okay, ligers are real. Take a male lion and a female tiger, and they can mate, which means that they did come from the same thing. But by Carolus Linnaeus's definition of species, and he's the guy that 400 years ago made up the binomial nomenclature system of classifying of all things, he was actually picking up on what the Bible said. Carolus Linnaeus was looking at what the Bible said in Genesis, the kinds reproducing after their kinds. And the word species in Latin is derivative of the word kind, or mean. The baramin are the created kinds. So he was actually saying kinds reproducing after their kinds. Something is the same species if they can mate and have babies. So that would mean dogs and wolves are the same kind, the same species, the wolf dog. But no, we call it Canis familiaris and Canis lupus for some reason. Dogs and coyotes and jackals and dingoes and maybe even foxes, and certainly all the different kinds, the 200 different breeds of pure breeding dogs, they're all dogs. They would be in the dog kind. Because they're interfertile, they should be listed as the same species. But anyway, Darwin's book really should have been called The Origin of the Orders, and the origins of the classes, and the origins of the phyla. If you make it species, you get into gray thingies here. And the definition of species in biology is certainly a lot grayer than it used to be. Now, you were asking about Neanderthals and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this is one of the things here. Have you ever noticed that in most evolutionary films, the primitive humans are less intelligent than the animals? Yeah, the humans in Ice Age couldn't talk, but the saber-toothed tiger and the little weasel guy and the mastodon, they could talk. Okay. So according to evolution's story, at what point did animal rights and human rights become two separate things? The idea that ancient people were dumber, oh man, we still can't figure out how they built the Great Pyramid of Giza. These people invented geometry, for goodness sake. I think they were smarter than us. There's plenty of evidence that we have gotten a J-curve of dumber and dumber. The only reason we have effective technology is because of the past. We haven't invented anything new in 50 years. Nothing. Nothing new. What about cell phones, Dr. Jackson? A cell phone is a miniaturization of Marconi's wireless, Tesla's wireless, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, and Michael Faraday's batteries, and also the computer chip is a transistor. It's a modified transistor. Where are all the hoverboards? And well, those don't really work now, do they? We're particle beam weapons and time travel and warp and transporters and all that. We did get action at a distance, Hawking radiation and things like that. But take a family from the year 1900 and bring them to the 1950s. Oh my gosh, electric lights, moving pictures, talkies, telephones, radios, nuclear power, electric dishwashers and television sets and everything, and garbage disposals. Now, okay, take somebody from the 1950s, say Ozzie and Harriet, and bring them to today. All they have to do is learn how to push buttons to make a phone call. Dishwashers, even microwaves. We had microwave radiation in the 1940s. It's just if you wanted a microwave oven, it was going to cost you $500,000, And I predicted when microwaves became very popular to my students, I said, you watch. They'll have this thing where you put it in there and it can make something cold real quick too. And then and that was in the 80s, I told my classes that. And in the 90s they did, but that cost like $50,000. They used, laser beams to slow down the atom's vibrations. So I really think you can make a case that we're getting dumber, and that would make sense with the accumulation of mutations. But okay, the question, I want to get to the question the person asked though. Here you go. Here is the depiction that we have. Now, okay, I'm sorry. Here's a Neanderthal skull, and in the background, a human skull like yours or mine. We depicted Neanderthals as ape-like people in the past, but now new museum displays show Neanderthals as really looking more like Scotsmen. And like I said, they had bigger brains than us. We now realize Neanderthal fossils have been found in Israel and all over the place. But mostly they're famous for being in Ice Age, Middle and Northern Europe. Now once the Ice Age ended, the other groups, tribes of humans moved into the area and outcompeted the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals were squatly built, broad nasal passages, perfect for cold weather. Their body built were perfect for cold weather. The insertion and origin of their muscles made them very strong, building lean-tos and hunting parties to go kill giant ground sloths and mastodons or mammoths and things like that. The depiction of Neanderthal life now is more like this. And I didn't get this from any creationist organization. I don't quote from creationists. I very rarely do. I'll make a big deal out of it when I do. Here's a Neanderthal couple. Look, Shona, there's a star. They're still. We didn't have Facebook back then, so this is how they picked their mates. And look, there's a fire in a family. We know they did hunting parties. They were intelligent and well organized and civilized people. Made clothing and all that kind of stuff. Okay. I've got to get back here to read it. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in Bristol, England. Neanderthals are often portrayed as more primitive, 2006. This has huge implications. The differences between Neanderthals and humans may have been much less than previously thought. The Western European Neanderthals are, in fact, today's Western Europeans. 4% of modern Europeans today are carrying Neanderthal DNA. We know because the Neanderthal Genome Project was completed and we've been able to identify Neanderthal genes. I could tell you a whole lot more about that. So now here's a museum display, and that's a little fuzzy, I'm sorry, it was like a very small picture. Homo sapiens neanderthalensis and Homo sapiens sapiens. We really don't look that much different. They had all of the qualities of being humans, and so they are now classified as Homo sapiens. Cro-Magnon, they've just given up on that. Heidelberg man, they've classified them as archaic Homo sapiens. Does that answer your question? Was it your question? It was my question. Oh, yeah. Does that answer your question? Yes, thank you. Okay. You got my little speech about we're getting dumber. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Larry.
We have a question over there.
I think she fell asleep.
Oh, my turn.
Yes.
We have a lot of things that are happening in Southwest Alaska where people will be flying from Dillingham to their homes like Togiak, and all of a sudden they see this real tall creature just about reaching a plane. They are called to us Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, yes, or Sasquatch, or yeah.
We don't know any other names, just Bigfoot. And there's some evidences of, like, when we put out the whitefish net traps during the winter, they pull that out and they eat all the fish, all of the fish.
Well,
and they found a colony of them in Southeast Alaska where they pull the, Southeast Alaska is more like they're what we call the Christmas trees, evergreens. They're bigger than ours in Southwest, but they pull them out through their roots, and they turn the tree upside down with the roots on top to mark their territories. But they will not come near the humans. They found a lodge near our village in Guihluk, but they are not coming near us. But they're real tall, because planes fly, small planes, float planes, they fly, like, I don't know what the elevation is, but they just about reach, because my cousin was in the plane, and he's the one that told us when my father died when we got together. And the other thing is, besides Ozzy and Harry, they should come and interview us. In 1975, we saw our first lights. In 1985, we had our first telephones. And as of August, we have running water and flush toilets.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you come from a rural area. Now, a lot of people swear that Bigfoots are real. People swear that the Loch Ness Monster's real. Atlantis is out there. The Bermuda Triangle. Again, aliens and UFOs, and the Mokele Mbembe, which is supposed to be a sauropod dinosaur in the Congo of Africa, the Ropens, live pterodactyls flying around Papua New Guinea. But none of that is science yet. We got to have observations and data and something recorded we can bring back to civilization and show people. It doesn't mean they're not all real. It just means it's not science yet. And there's a whole field called cryptozoology, which means like hidden in a crypt. Cryptozoology is hidden animal life. And some of these could be mythical. Some of these could be real. And a lot of myths have their their anchors in something was real. The manatees in the Caribbean, the Caribbean manatee is now extinct, but the Florida manatee is in order Sirenia, named after the sirens, you know, the mermaids that sat on the rock and make sailors sail towards the rock and crash. So they named that after mermaids because, you know, they thought maybe those were mermaids sitting on the rocks, you know. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I could say about that. I think it'd be cool if the Loch Ness Monster was a plesiosaur. That'd be great. If there's a whole little school of plesiosaurs there in Loch Ness, that's pretty deep water. Jacques Cousteau actually took a little submarine down there to try to find him. That would be cool. It'd be interesting, but all those ideas are interesting. But they're not science till we catch one or till we actually go visit. Maybe we could go visit a colony, the colony of Bigfoots, like Jake Kasuli visiting the Na'vi on the planet Pandora, and then get to know them. You know, like we've gotten to know the great apes. I mean, Jane Goodall went and lived there with the mountain apes and stuff like that. But until we actually can verify it, it's still not science till we have observations that are reported and all that. Some of these things might be true and some of them might not be, but not science till we have data.
Any more? Okay.
I'm a fan, and some of the questions I have regarding the whole evolutionary thing is just an intellectual challenge I've always wondered about, which is the idea that not only one member of a species has to cross the species barrier, but it has to find a mate who has likewise crossed the species barrier in such a way as to either breed to true, or it has to be able to breed back across the species barrier which it has crossed. And at some point that becomes a little bit difficult for me to get my head around that happening as many times it has to have happened. But I am going to challenge on the idea of sort of the negative trend of intelligence, because I don't think that holds up. I think what you're looking at in modernity is an increase in innovation, possibly a decrease in pure invention, but when you consider the propagation of information and of ideas that has occurred in the last 150 to 200 years, and the fact that information is now more readily available, and so what we're seeing is much more, as you said, sort of putting together these various pieces
Yeah.
in creating new ways or knowledge. In my lifetime, certainly, and I think about my grandfather's lifetime, going from, we have a picture of him on a Conestoga wagon, and then living to see the space shuttle. And in my lifetime, remembering in the 1980s when I bought a TRS-80 Model 4 and had a Commodore 64 with a cassette tape drive, to carrying in my pocket a phone that has access to the entire world knowledge base, relatively speaking, it's pretty darned impressive, and I don't think it's really slowed up. I think it has changed in its nature. So I would agree we are not seeing the same pure invention that was occurring previously, but we are seeing a much greater innovation occurring, which is putting together various pieces to create new knowledge. So just sort of to challenge that one idea.
Well, the genetics of our brains and the building up of mutations, bad mutations, not the kind that give you superpowers like on X-Men, is being documented now. This is an article about that. Even Isaac Newton admitted that he was building on people's past work. He said, if it appears that I've been able to see so far, it is because I have been standing on the shoulders of giants. So he gave credit to the people that laid the groundwork. And I think, yeah, we may be doing innovation. Most of that is for money. That is money driven. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we've always used science to make our lives more like what we wanted them to be. But we're not seeing minds like Eratosthenes and Aristotle, Socrates, Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton. Hawking believes that he is one of those, you know, with the four great ones. And if he does find the theory of everything, I think I'd have to agree with him that he belongs in that group. He's brilliant. We just don't have minds like that. What this guy says here, if an average citizen from Athens of 100 BC were to appear among us, he or she would be among the brightest and most intellectually alive of our colleagues and companions with good memory, a broad range of ideas, and a clear-sighted view of important issues. Furthermore, I would guess that he or she would be among the most emotionally stable of our friends and colleagues, because he's talking about the broken genes and how the genes, with copying errors through the generations, are building up. So this is a genetic end to it. You're right that, I mean, a cell phone is certainly superior to Alexander Graham Bell's first phone and all of that. We've done that, and we've gone from the Conestoga wagons to space shuttles. But we had jet aircraft, jet airliners in the 1950s too. I just see there were the line, from 1900 to 1955 up to 1955 to 2015. It's just not. Our progress as far as real discovery or invention has slowed down. Now, in the year 1910, I think it was, the head of the U.S. Patent Office said, everything that could be invented has been invented, in 1910. So, at that time they thought we'd reached, this is it. They've gone about as far as they can go. And really, we hadn't at that point. But the entire world changed. In my great-grandmother's lifetime, I was talking with you about my great-grandmother who taught me how to tie double knots in my shoes. She was born in 1892, lived to be 96. But the stuff she saw, the whole world changed. The world is changing now in my lifetime, but not in quite that way. It's communications technology that's advancing because it's along the whims of our people. Well, yeah, this is something, it's one of those discussions that we could have. But I definitely do not think that ancient humans were less intelligent than us, given the achievements that they made many thousands of years ago. This is. Casey.
If someone were to attempt to convince you that humans evolved from an ape-like ancestor, what are the specific genetic and fossil pieces of evidence you would require them to provide? And if they were able to provide this evidence, would you be willing to change your mind?
That would be a human positional resistance to change kind of question. What I'm more worried about are the things that they themselves say should be convincing that they don't have. What they themselves say and then contradict themselves. I had a student in one of my classes say, well, Dr. Jackson, is there anything about evolution you do believe? And I said, yeah, the stuff where they don't contradict themselves about it. It's the missing stuff, like I said, it's systematic. Now, if we actually did find a missing link that actually is really part monkey, part human, that actually could be shown to be a part of a story, a bigger story that led, but it wouldn't just be humans, monkeys to humans. It would be fish to monkeys. I mean, the whole story, don't forget that the story says that bacteria turned into pterodactyls. That's the theory of evolution. And I've had people say to me, oh no, that's not what it says. Oh yes, it is. Ask any biologist, and unless they're an abominable liar, they will have to tell you, yes, the theory says that bacteria, well, even the beginning of the X-Men movies, evolution, it is the way that our species has evolved from bacteria to the reigning species on the planet. That the particles to people theory of evolution, of course, is there, that the Big Bang actually gave rise to the chemicals that turned into bacteria. Here, I probably need to point out something here. Textbooks, college and high school textbooks. How about the textbook that I teach out of? That bothers me. When they get to the evolution part, all the science is so good in all these things until you get to the evolution part, and then they just start telling these stories. And they even contradict themselves, which bothers me. Let's see, process of evolution. Here we go. Oh, no, that's a different page. How about origin of life stuff? When they get, especially the origin of life stuff, they contradict themselves on the same page, which bothers me. All right, where am I going here? That one's a big one, isn't it? I knew it was in the book. What would convince me is if scientific observation and data didn't go against what the theory says, didn't go against the predictions of the theory of what we should actually see when we look at the data. If the damning things would be answered, that would, it's all the negative stuff that goes against evolution. If that was just, could be answered, then evolution would at least be possible in my mind. Let me see here. Let me try and get to show you what kind of thing that annoys me the most, and it is this origin of life stuff. Okay, here we go. I mean, the book, All Cells Come from Pre-Existing Cells, Glencoe Biology says the cell law or the cell theory says all cells come from pre-existing cells. In the 1850s, Schleiden and Schwann and Rudolf Virchow came up with that. And then it says right here in the book, Francesco Redi and Louis Pasteur proved spontaneous generation was not true. And then it starts going on about how spontaneous generation could happen. Small organic molecules might have formed from substances present in Earth's early atmosphere and oceans. Right, I can't believe the contradiction on the same page.
The missing link.
Well, see, their experiments proved that biogenesis is true, not abiogenesis. And then it starts going, earliest organisms are probably aerobic, heterotrophic. And later in the same book, look at this. This is even worse. People once thought life was able to arise spontaneously. Two scientists designed controlled experiments to disprove it. Life comes only from life. And then right under it, in the same page, it says, scientific evidence supports the hypothesis that small organic molecules formed from substances present in early Earth's atmosphere and oceans. At some point, nucleic acids must have formed. Then clusters of organic molecules might have formed protocells that might have evolved into the first true cells. If they could stop contradicting themselves, and I'm sorry, looking like an intellectual clown show to me. I'm like, man, if I was an evolutionist, I'd be like, let's at least get this off the same page. If this isn't seen as a contradiction, then in that case, this to me is blind faith. Now, if they could actually quit saying that I was having a nice chat with Mitch Cruzan, the vice president of the Darwin Coalition, at the Darwin Day Festival at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I got along with Dr. Cruzan. We disagreed, but we had good conversations. And he said, well, I don't see how you could believe what you believe, Dr. Jackson. So I explained a little about creation. I said, well, I don't see how you could believe what you believe. He goes, what do you mean? He thought there was nothing wrong with evolution. He was shocked that I said that. And I said, well, you believe in spontaneous generation. He said, no, we don't. I said, yes, you do. You believe it happened at least once, don't you? That there wasn't any life on Earth, and then life formed from chemicals in the ocean, right? He was speechless. He'd never thought that. Dr. Cruzan, smart man, okay, smart man, but there was some kind of a mental block that you have to be an advocate of the theory. So what would it take for me? First, they'd have to stop contradicting themselves like this. Then they'd have to stop saying things that are known against the known laws of science, stop bringing up theories that go against the data, and then actually present stories that might work. There is a small group of evolutionists trying to do this, and they've named their new theory extended evolutionary synthesis. The president of the Darwin Coalition is one of the leaders in this, Massimo Pigliucci. And they have a new theory of evolution beyond neo-Darwinism, or the modern synthesis they call it, called extended evolutionary synthesis, that has nothing to do with fossils or DNA. No genetics and no fossils. It's called phenotypic plasticity. And it's a new theory that says that when the environment changes, the organism changes to match the environment, and then somehow And here's the magic part. Somehow, that gets into the DNA and then goes to the next generation. Now, the somehow part is the magic part of the theory that they don't know how. There's some chemical or new law or something that could do it. What would it take? They'd have to have predictions of any theory if they actually come true, are the cash in the bank for the theory. When Einstein's theory came out in, 1912, 1918, his theory predicted the bending of starlight by gravity, gravitational fields. And so everyone knew that the sun's gravity being so strong, if any gravitational field could bend starlight, a beam of light, the sun's could. And of course, the only way to look at a star that its star beam would pass close to the sun would be during a solar eclipse. So all the scientists in the world waited with bated breath for the first total eclipse of the sun, and they all took boats and planes, and no, they didn't have planes, boats and trains, and horse carts, whatever, to the site, and it was a cloudy day, so that ruined it. But then they waited for the next total eclipse of the sun, and darned if there was a star that, according to the star charts, was supposed to be over here, supposed to be here, and it looked like it was over there, and it had been refracted, and that proved it. So cash in the bank for any scientific theory is something that has got to be true, and the only way it could be true is if your theory's true, and then we don't know it. It turns out to be true. That's something I would need to see. Predictions of evolution. Now, people will say, well, we have opposable thumbs just like monkeys. We have fingernails just like monkeys. You know, that would happen. Okay, I debated a professor at I think it is Oklahoma State University just last semester. And he got up, the president of the Atheist Club got up along with him and said to the audience, now look around. And he made the statement, everyone who's below 5'5", stand up. Everyone who's above 6 feet, stand up. He said, look at this. We're all different. That's all evolution is. It's just how we're all different. And he started talking about natural selection and what if there was some poison gas in the room and it was very heavy like radon and only the short people would die, then natural selection would eliminate all the short genes and now the human race would have evolved into taller people. I got up and had to say to the audience, now look, if God made us, there would still be short people and tall people. And this has nothing to do with how we came from rats, the Morganucodon rat. So it's these little baited things where you'll look at something that could happen if evolution wasn't true and then say, you see, it's true. Natural selection's true. Natural selection would happen if Lucky the Leprechaun made us. It doesn't have to be God or evolution. The fit would still survive. That's just common sense. But natural selection, survival of the fittest, has absolutely zero power to prove that evolution is true. And yet, they put an equal sign between it. That makes me angry too, because that is, I know these people are smarter than that. I know they're not stupid. They're not stupid. But they're buying this for an emotional reason. I want it to be true so bad, I'll just say that survival of the fittest is evolution. And therefore evolution is true, and anyone who disagrees with me must be stupid. Well, I know they're not that stupid. This is an emotional vesting in something to actually, the only way the scientific method can prove that you're right is if something is observed, it could only be true your way. And all the other, these control variables are eliminated, and then it's only the experimental variable that is actually producing the effect that we see. So I would need to see hard science instead of stories. I would have to see hard science that does it. I'm sorry, you actually asked me a question that has stuff that's in all 50 of my presentations. It's the big giant picture problem with this. If I saw something that really did say that it was scientifically true, I'd have to totally recalibrate what I think the Bible is and what I think the Bible means. It would be a total paradigm shift for me. But I certainly haven't seen any reason to do that. And what I'm actually doing, I think, in the scientific community is very healthy. I'm being a gadfly, like Socrates. And I'm just pointing at something. The emperor has no clothes. And if the emperor doesn't have any clothes, people ought to see it. And I think that will put a little mobility into scientific thinking in the scientific community that's needed. even if I'm wrong, this kind of stimulation of discussion and honest debate is necessary. In every classroom, the latest Gallup polls have shown that more than 50% of Americans don't believe in evolution. And if you're teaching a class, that means that probably half your class doesn't believe in evolution, and half does. And the half that doesn't believe in evolution, many of them are going to... I actually was teaching the subject. My very first year I taught biology, I had a fight between a Muslim girl and a Catholic boy. The Catholic boy believed in evolution, and the Muslim girl freaked on this kid because he was saying, well, if you believe in Adam and Eve and the snake and the apple, she freaked on him because Orthodox Muslims are much more strict about Genesis being true than most Christians are. Don't forget, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and Muslims all stick together till you get up to Abraham about 2056 BC. And then is when we split off in different directions on it. But everybody's online then. Muslims are a lot more strict about it than a lot of Christians are.